3 words, just for fun. That is what the President of the United States reportedly said when asked whether American forces might strike Iran's Karg Island again. Not because of a specific military threat, not because of a new provocation, not because of any intelligence warning that required immediate action, just for fun. Al Jazeera reported that statement. It is on the record. And if you're trying to understand why the Iran conflict has stopped feeling like a calculated military campaign and started feeling like something far less predictable, those 3 words are as good a place to start as any. Because Karg Island is not a random target. It is not a military installation in the conventional sense. It is not a missile battery or a command center or an air defense site. Karg Island is the beating heart of Iran's entire oil export economy. Roughly 90% of all Iranian crude oil exports flow through the terminal facilities on that small island in the northern Persian Gulf. When the AP confirmed that Trump said the U.S. had already bombed military sites on Karg Island, and that was confirmed by the AP with 578 reader engagements, one of the most read political stories on their platform that day, the world understood that this conflict had crossed a threshold that no previous confrontation between the United States and Iran had ever crossed. And now, according to Al Jazeera's reporting, the president has suggested it might happen again. Just for fun, stay with me. Because what we are about to walk through, the confirmed facts of what has already happened at Karg, what another strike would actually mean for global oil markets, for the Iranian economy, for the escalatory dynamics of this conflict, and for the broader strategic picture that Bloomberg, the New York Times, Reuters, Fox News, and CENTCOM's own releases have all been documenting in real time, is the most consequential single story in this entire war. Let's begin with what is confirmed and sourced, because in a conflict this fast-moving and this politically charged, precision is everything. On February 28, 2026, U.S. Central Command officially launched Operation Epic Fury. This is documented on CENTCOM's own website. Coordinated strikes by U.S. and Israeli forces targeting Iranian military infrastructure began on that date. Within days, the USS Abraham Lincoln was confirmed conducting flight operations in support of the operation. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, transited the Suez Canal on March 5th, confirmed by CENTCOM's own imagery. B-52 Stratofortresses were confirmed launching in support of Operation Epic Fury on March 4th. HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems were confirmed deployed and active in support of the operation per CENTCOM's own video releases. This was a major, multi-domain American military campaign from day one. Trump himself confirmed, according to AP reporting with 578 engagements, one of their most read stories of the period, that U.S. forces had bombed military sites on Karg Island, which the AP described as vital to Iran's oil network. That description is not editorial color. It is a factual statement about what Karg Island actually is and what its destruction would actually mean. Now let's talk about Karg in detail, because you cannot understand why this story matters so much without understanding what that island actually does. Karg Island sits approximately 25 kilometers off the coast of Iran's Khuzestan province in the northern Persian Gulf. It has been the primary export terminal for Iranian crude oil since the late 1950s. The infrastructure there includes massive offshore loading platforms, subsea pipelines, onshore storage tanks with a combined capacity that has been estimated at tens of millions of barrels, and the administrative and logistical systems that coordinate the movement of Iranian oil onto tankers destined for buyers in Asia, Europe, and beyond. When analysts say that approximately 90% of Iranian crude oil exports flow through Karg, they are not describing a bottleneck that can be easily bypassed. They are describing an infrastructure concentration that took decades to build, that operates as a single integrated system, and that has no meaningful domestic alternative at comparable scale. The East-West pipeline and the Jask terminal, which Iran developed partly as an alternative to reduce Karg's vulnerability, have significantly smaller throughput capacity. Karg is not one of several options. For Iran's oil export economy, Karg is essentially the only option at volume. Bloomberg reported that oil had already surged past $100 a barrel in the second week of the conflict. That price movement happened before any confirmed strike on Karg. The AP confirmed Trump said U.S. forces had struck Karg. Bloomberg then reported separately on why the U.S. attack on Iran's Karg Island was a worry for oil markets, running it as a specific explainer piece because the implications required explanation. Bloomberg also reported that satellite imagery showed 2 oil tankers at Karg after the strikes, signaling that at minimum, some loading capacity remained operational. But the underlying concern about what further strikes would mean had already moved global markets. Fox News reported that Iran was threatening $200 oil barrels as the U.S. prepared to release emergency petroleum reserves. That figure, $200, is not a round number pulled from thin air. It is Iran's public declaration of what it believes would happen to global crude prices if Karg were taken fully offline during a period when the Strait of Hormuz is also being contested, when shipping companies are rerouting fleets around Africa, and when strategic petroleum reserves in consuming nations were already being tapped at emergency rates. Let's think about what that number actually means for the real world, because $200 oil is not just a commodity price, it is a restructuring of the global economy. Bloomberg reported that gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel prices had already jumped significantly in the second week of the conflict as fighting choked off oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. At $100 per barrel crude, drivers in the United States were already seeing sharp increases at the pump. Bloomberg explicitly reported that the damage done to supply chains by the U.S.-Israel war with Iran meant higher prices would persist for longer across America, not just during the conflict but after it. Their reporting noted this structural damage explicitly. $200 oil would not be a temporary spike that resolves when the shooting stops. It would be a price level that, if sustained for even a few weeks, would reshape consumer behavior, industrial planning, agricultural economics, and government fiscal positions across dozens of countries simultaneously. Bloomberg documented Peru's natural gas crisis as one concrete example of cascading effects. Peru's main gas fields had stopped shipping fuel precisely when global prices were spiking, creating a double squeeze on industries dependent on cheap energy. Indonesia's farming communities were being hit by rising fuel costs documented by Bloomberg's reporting. Bloomberg confirmed that fuel shortages from the war were beginning to threaten global food supply chains. The New York Times ran an explainer specifically on why so little had been done to head off the Hormuz problem over preceding years, implicitly acknowledging that the current situation was not a surprise to analysts who had been watching these vulnerabilities build. And when Bloomberg's headline says, "Trump's quick war in Iran is turning into a test of endurance," that framing is backed by every economic indicator the publication was simultaneously tracking. Now back to the just for fun comment and what it tells us about the strategic picture. Al Jazeera's reporting on Trump saying the U.S. may hit Karg again just for fun was published prominently and generated significant discussion. The phrase itself, regardless of whether it was intended literally or as political posturing, carries real strategic consequences. Here is why. Iran's calculation throughout this conflict, documented through Bloomberg's analysis, drawing on Iranian-American scholar Vali Nasser, confirmed by Iran's foreign minister's public statement that Iran does not seek a ceasefire and will continue to defend itself per Al Jazeera reporting, has been that Tehran can outlast American political will. The argument is that a prolonged, expensive, economically disruptive conflict reshapes Washington's domestic calculus in ways that favor Iranian endurance over American staying power. That is the strategic theory. It depends on Iran's adversaries behaving in predictable, cost-conscious ways. A president who suggests bombing a country's primary oil export infrastructure again just for fun is not behaving in the way that strategic theory anticipates, and that unpredictability cuts in multiple directions simultaneously. It frightens financial markets. Bloomberg confirmed the Magnificent Seven technology stocks had entered correction territory with the Iran war cited as a contributing factor. And Bank of America's strategist publicly warned markets were beginning to resemble conditions from 2008. It frightens allied governments. Reuters confirmed that Britain had relocated some diplomatic staff from Tel Aviv to elsewhere in Israel as a precaution. And Fox News confirmed the State Department was urging Americans to leave the broader Middle East region entirely. It frightens global institutions. Bloomberg confirmed that the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan were all recalibrating their economic outlooks because of what was happening in the Gulf. But unpredictability also frightens the Iranian side of the equation, because if the United States is willing to strike Karg without a specific military justification, if the threshold for further escalation is genuinely as low as the president's comments suggested, then Iran's strategic bet on endurance becomes dramatically more complicated. A country that is already absorbing significant damage to its military infrastructure, that has confirmed casualties per Al Jazeera's live tracker of more than 1,144 dead in Iran, that is watching its oil export hub get struck and potentially struck again, that country has to consider what its endgame actually looks like. The Iranian foreign minister's statement that Iran does not seek a ceasefire and will continue to defend itself was made before the Karg strike was confirmed and before the just for fun comment was reported. It is worth asking whether that posture remains the operative Iranian position in the days that follow, because the calculus changes when the target is not a military installation but an economic lifeline. Fox News reported that retired General Jack Keane said the U.S. can seize Iran's main oil export hub at a time of our choosing. That statement from a retired four-star general with significant influence on American military commentary, made on the record and published by Fox News, tells you something about the range of options being discussed publicly in American strategic circles. Seizing and striking are different operations with different implications, but both start from the same premise: that Karg Island is a lever of Iranian national power that the United States is now willing to treat as a legitimate military and economic target. Bloomberg confirmed that 2 oil tankers were seen at Karg after the strikes per satellite imagery from a private firm. That detail matters because it indicates Iran was attempting to continue some level of oil export operations even in the immediate aftermath of confirmed strikes on the facility. The economic pressure that Iran is generating through the Strait of Hormuz situation, the mines reported by Fox News, the suicide skiffs confirmed deployed, the threats to UAE ports confirmed by the AP, the drone attack and fire at a UAE oil hub confirmed by Bloomberg. All of that pressure on global oil markets is simultaneously pressuring Iran's own position, because Iran needs oil revenue to sustain a prolonged conflict. If Karg goes fully offline, not partially damaged, not functionally degraded, but genuinely closed to tanker traffic for an extended period, Iran loses its primary source of foreign currency income at the exact moment it needs that income most. The strategic logic of a sustained Karg campaign, from the American perspective, is that it compresses the economic timeline of the conflict in ways that purely military strikes on weapons facilities do not. It does not just degrade Iranian military capability, it drains the financial reservoir that sustains Iranian military capability over time. That is why the "just for fun" comment is so significant beyond its casual framing. It signals a willingness to return to Karg without the kind of specific military justification that previous American administrations would have felt obligated to articulate publicly. It removes the predictability that Iran's endurance strategy depends on, and it introduces into the global oil market a genuine ongoing uncertainty about whether Karg, which was already struck once at the confirmed direction of the American president, might be struck again before the next tanker finishes loading. Bloomberg's reporting on why the Karg strike was a worry for oil markets laid out the supply implications precisely. Karg handles a volume of Iranian crude that, if removed from global markets suddenly and for a sustained period, cannot be easily replaced in the short term. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve release that Bloomberg confirmed was being coordinated helps at the margins. It does not solve the structural problem. No reserve release does. Strategic reserves exist to bridge short disruptions of days or weeks, not to substitute indefinitely for a major producing nation's primary export terminal. The AP confirmed that Iran was threatening UAE ports, specifically as the conflict entered its 3rd week. Al Jazeera confirmed Saudi Arabia intercepted a drone in its eastern province. Bloomberg confirmed the UAE oil hub halt after a drone attack and fire. The conflict is not contained to Iranian and American assets. It is touching Gulf infrastructure across multiple countries simultaneously. Every escalation, including the suggestion that Karg might be struck again just for fun, adds another variable to a system that is already operating with multiple simultaneous instabilities. CENTCOM's own public release record tells the story of an operation that has already produced significant unintended costs alongside its intended effects. A KC-135 refueling tanker lost over Iraq, all crew members confirmed deceased. 3 F-15s involved in a friendly fire incident in Kuwait on the very first operational days. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad attacked twice, confirmed by the New York Times, with Americans told to leave Iraq immediately. These are the documented costs of an operation that was described at its outset as targeted and controlled. The New York Times' Ezra Klein show ran a piece titled "What Trump Didn't Know About Iran." That framing was what the president did not know, is a journalistic way of raising questions about whether the assumptions that informed the decision to launch Operation Epic Fury were accurate, and what the consequences of those potential miscalculations are now becoming visible. What we know from all the sourced, confirmed reporting across every major news organization is this: the United States struck Karg Island. The president confirmed it. The president then suggested it might happen again. Iran's oil exports are at serious risk. Global oil markets have already broken through $100 per barrel. Iran is threatening $200. The Strait of Hormuz is contested. Shipping companies are rerouting entire fleets. Global central banks are recalibrating. American personnel have been killed. Iranian casualties number in the thousands per Al Jazeera's tracker. The conflict is in its 3rd week with no ceasefire in sight, and Iran's foreign minister explicitly rejecting one. And somewhere in all of that, 3 words are echoing through every trading floor, every foreign ministry, every defense command center, and every tanker captain's radio in the Persian Gulf. Just for fun. Those 3 words may end up being the most consequential phrase spoken by any political leader in this entire conflict. Not because of what they mean about intentions, but because of what they reveal about the absence of a predictable framework. And because in geopolitics, as in financial markets, it is not certainty that causes the most damage. It is the removal of it. The story is not over. The oil is not flowing normally. The tankers are navigating uncertainty. And the question of what happens the next time those three words become action is one that every analyst, every government, and every market on Earth is now trying to price.